In this lesson, we'll be continuing to work with a site that we set up in the previous lesson, and we'll be taking a look at CSS. Well, if we take a look at our web page, right, and we've also taken a look at our web page in the browser, we're going to see a lot of different things here. We are going to see text, we're going to see images and color, and we are also going to remember that there are really two big parts to learning web development. There's the HTML, and that is actually the content on the page. All this stuff on the page that you see right here, that's considered content. When you see things like color and fonts and font sizes, well, that is CSS. The HTML is the content, the CSS is the presentation. When you start working with CSS, there are a few different things that you have to remember. Let's go ahead and take a look at our CSS styles panel. Now I'm just going to pull this guy away and separate him from the group, and I'll just move the files panel over here. You'll notice that I have the index page open. If you were following along from the previous example, you have that open as well. If not, it's just the index page right here in the files panel. Now the CSS styles panel can be customized in a couple of different ways. I like to click this button here at the top called All, and I like to expand the panel a little bit. Now, if we look in the top of the CSS styles panel, you're going to see all kinds of things. Some of these things that you see are actually HTML tags, like the body tag. I think of the body tag as the granddaddy of all tags. If you just create one page with nothing on it, you're going to have the body tag. So the body tag has things like the page background color, the default color for the fonts, the font family, the font size, and a few other things. Now, as you go down this list, if you want to look at some of the styles, just go down this list, and when you click in the top of the styles panel, you are going to see the set properties on the bottom. When you work with CSS, you're going to hear something called property value pair. This is a property, and this is a value. This is a property, and this is a value. So right here, for example, on the H1, this is a rule that tells all of our H1 tags how to look. So if you notice, if you put your cursor right here, you'll be able to tell that an H1 tag is used in your code a couple of ways. One of the ways is because when we select the item or put your cursor anywhere in the item over in Design View, if you take a peek over into the code, you can see the tag that's applied to that, and there's our H1. Another place that I like to look is right down here in the tag selector. We see that wherever our cursor is, we'll see the closest tag to that element all the way back to the body tag. So if my cursor is here in the middle of a paragraph, it's going to say, oh, well, the closest tag to you is a paragraph, which is in a div tag called content, which is in a div tag called container, all the way back to the body tag. So if I was wondering why this H1 is red, well, that's when I look over here in the CSS styles panel and I'd say, oh, my rule for my H1s, well, the color is red and here's the font size. Now, what if I wanted to make this a different font? Could I do that? Absolutely. Since we're working with a template, our CSS styles for this particular project has already been started for us. To add on to a style, you can simply double click up here on the H1, and this is going to open my CSS style rule definition dialog box. Just like we don't have to create HTML, we also don't have to write CSS. Not for the most part. You will eventually, just because there will be things that you want to do that are fancy and sophisticated, but for now, we don't really have to do that. We are, however, going to choose a font family other than our default font. Let's maybe go with Georgia Times Roman and Times Serif, okay? This tells our viewer, you know, we really want you to see this H1 in Georgia. If you don't have that, you might see it in Times Roman. If you don't have that, Times, or our last choice would be any serif font that you have. And now let's click OK, and you're going to see anywhere that you have an H1, which in our case is just right here, now has a different property and value set for that. All right? Now, this is a really quick example of what the CSS is for this type of selector, which is called a tag selector. There are actually 4 kinds of selectors, and I'm just going to go through these briefly. I know that we don't have a ton of time to learn all about CSS, but this is definitely important. Whenever you're creating a new style, you're going to go down here to the plus sign in the bottom of the CSS Styles panel. And the first thing that you're going to have to do is decide what kind of selector that you're going to be dealing with. There are 4 different kinds of selector types and they all do different things. Typically, I like to tell people this. If you're going to work on your car, you're going to decide which tool you need to use based on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to change a tire, well, there's a certain tool for that. If you're working on the interior, there's another tool for that. Spark plug, a different tool for that. And that's exactly how you can think of these different selector types. They all do a different thing. The tag selector redefines any HTML tag, and that's what we've been working with. Remember the H1 tag that we were just looking at? If you want to set a rule for the way a tag is supposed to look every single time it's used, the tool for that or the selector type is tag. There are a couple of other selectors that we will be looking at as we go along in these videos, and those are classes. Classes are kind of cool. Classes don't automatically do anything the way the tag selector does. The class selector lets you create a class. Maybe I want some blue italic text and I want to apply it every now and then whenever I want. That's a perfect example for a class. An ID is only allowed to be used one time and has very specific purposes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then there's the compound selector, so you can do things like nested rules, rules within rules. If you are maybe a paragraph tag that's over in a div tag named sidebar, you have specific rules. That's one thing it does. And another thing it does is it allows you to style your link colors. We're going to talk about all of those as we go along in the Dreamweaver chapter, but for now the one that I want to focus on is tag. Tag selectors allow you to create rules for any existing HTML tag. I'm just going to hit cancel out of there. Let me scroll down the page a little bit, and I'm going to put my cursor right here in more info, and I'm going to say, oh, well, that's an H2, right? I see that here and here. Well, here's an H2 tag here that says, oh, I'm supposed to be blue, and this is my font size. Well, perhaps I don't want this to be blue, maybe a different color. We could always double click here and get the same panel that we saw for the H1, or since the property's already set, it's just as easy to click right here on this little color square and change it to any other color that you might like it to be. Okay, so if I decide, oh, I would like to see maybe what green looks like, or fluorescent green, that's horrible. Let me see what it would look like if I put my cursor over here and actually sample the exact same color of my page background, and that looks nice. All right, so CSS, you just got your first taste of what CSS is and how it relates to HTML. In our next videos, we're going to get a little bit deeper with CSS, and we're also going to take a step back and I'm going to show you how we created the layout that we're working on. So I'll see you in the next video.